my particular presentation will really talk about Cargil, and I'll give you some background on Cargil. Cargil is a very large company, but not a lot of people know much about Cargil. So to take you through some perspective of where we are overall, both from a system landscape, where we are in our SAP journey. We are, as of right now, still very committed to SAP being our ERP tool of choice. And talk about where we are from really a supply chain and sales and operations planning perspective across our company. And then talk a little bit about SAP IBP and our pilot project with our salt business. So, and that is something we partnered with Bristlecone on. But we have deployed APO across 2 of our SAP instances right now. And then you can see a lot of hope, and that's part of my role in Cargil is to figure out what does our supply chain solution, our target architecture really look like. And so we've implemented IBP. I'll talk about a business that sits on our TC2 landscape. In particular, that's salt, but we also already are going live with demand planning for an animal disassembly business in Central America. So that's why you can see, we're going to go from, my intention is that we would go from an APO asset that's sitting tied to some of these ECCs and migrate more and more to integrated business planning across our instances. Partly for visibility, partly because we're only a short way through our SAP roadmap, right? So we're really faced with, do we continue to pump out what we have been and do APO? Or is it time to really look ahead at the future and think about, where really should we be? And do we really want to be at this 10 years from now and look back and say, wow, now we got to think about, is this really the right strategy? So instead, we're trying to get a little bit ahead of that and be smart and build for our future. We expect over several years that we will try to coalesce and get our businesses really orientated around sales and operations planning processes, partly for visibility, partly because of market pressures, right? We may have very large revenue, but our actual final bottom line is very small. We're in businesses where margins are very, very tight, and market pressures, consumer demand for our goods continue to really pressure us to be smarter about what we do. What we've done before and being very reactionary is not going to work going forward. So where we really want to see ourselves is really to have integrated business planning. So not just sales and operations planning across our businesses, but integrated business planning, bringing the financial aspect into what we do. We want to eventually have a supply chain competency center instead of having that type of talent diversified across all of our businesses or not exist at all in some of our businesses. But start to be smart and leverage our size a little bit more and start to get supply chain metrics. So I know some of you guys are in semiconductor industries. I'm sure you're way ahead on the map on some of this, but for us, we're still all over the map. One would think typically your pilot would not be a complex business, but we decided, yes, let's do that. We had our salt business is in North America, and then they have a little bit, they do have a location in South America, which was not in our scope. But our salt business is actually quite advanced in their supply chain planning processes and system use. So they had been one of the earlier deployed businesses on our SAP journey, and they've done quite well utilizing ECC, utilizing even APO. They've done linear optimization for over a decade to manage their supply chain and really try to consistently find the least cost sourcing. So you can imagine salt's a commodity, margins are very, very tight. And so they're constantly figuring out how to best source their customers. So they're advanced in that perspective. There are 2 stages of demand reviews, there are 2 stages of supply reviews, and then the financial integration, and then finally the leadership review. So a very standard S&OP process that they followed. So why did we get to even trying to do IBP? Well, really, despite them being very good on what we had already deployed and having good, strong processes, there were still gaps. And so really, we had worked with the salt business to have a SAP-enabled add-in to APO to do what-if scenario planning. And it actually worked quite well, and it still works fine. But APO is a transaction-based system, right? We needed it to go all the way down to execution. That's challenging when you have to do a very invasive or very strategic scenario. So if you wanted to fundamentally change what your network looked like, not network design, but change what your supply chain network was, that took a lot of effort on top of, for our business folks to bring all that data together, get it at the level that was needed, and then be able to optimize. And then, of course, wait for the reporting cycle as it went through business warehouse, and finally get their data out. And then if they had to do it again and again and again to keep comparing their scenarios, as a very long process. So the reality is their strategic what-if processes just did not move at the speed of business. So they ended up, more times than not, throwing those scenarios to the side and say, yeah, I hope we get at them at some point. But unfortunately, those scenarios that they left pile up were really opportunity left on the table that they just did not get to. Integrated, you know, SAP's IBP tool would be that platform where we really bring everything together. So the operations team, finance team, pricing, we really tried to bring all that information together and finally get true alignment. So we could actually truly tie financial projections with the scenarios and the S&OP process. So this just illustrates, this is what I think is really unique about what we did with our salt business and with partnering with Bristlecone and SAP, is really push the envelope here. So we implemented S&OP and the supply module, but this is what we were really focused on, is our ability to do this what-if modeling with the optimizer. So the type, and then through really the power of HANA and the ease of use of IBP, also be able to take all those scenarios and compare them very quickly, whether that's to leadership, whether that's to the core team itself, to really compare what's your output of those scenarios and evaluate your best. Still keep APO running, despite bringing them on IBP, so this is a hybrid model. But we need APO to still drive execution. We need it to drive production scheduling, our deployment, so there's a need to keep it there. What that meant, though, is that we had extra pressure here to say, well, we have to have an integrated planning model that is so close to APO that it doesn't allow for people to distrust the numbers just because it came from another system. And we actually accomplished that. So it's amazing, the optimization model between the two. We were literally, I mean, so close, I couldn't have actually predicted we would have. And we are using dashboards. I think that's, the dashboards and charts and analytics has gotten a lot of airplay today. But I think that's something that we underestimated going into this project, the value of what those would be. And I think that's actually ended up being one of the best selling points that the business has realized, is like, wow, that's pretty impactful that we can pull this information together in a very visible and easy to consume way with our leadership teams that we just weren't able to before. And then long, arduous deployments, right? And so really when you look at our journey, we did a POC really almost a year ago from now, and officially kicked off our project in April. So that POC, we really tested out, is IBP capable of doing the what-if scenarios that we really wanted it to do? And we actually didn't even get the system itself until the end of May. And so really we took through the summer into the fall to be able to design. And we did a very iterative methodology that Bristlecone had brought to the table, and that worked quite well. We were able to really break up the scope and build sections of our model at a time, train the business on that, actually work with it, make tweaks, set it aside, and then continue to build on more and more complexity. The value stakes here isn't so much that the supply chain community appreciates what's coming out of integrated business planning, but the finance and the commercial teams are all coming together, and they're all looking at one number. And we can only get that if we really had the financials correct. I'm very excited about, I think, the speed that we have here, the ability to really analyze their scenarios and really be able to have data for their leadership team to consume and try to bring truly everybody together for that S&OP process. So when you step back and look a little bit at the bigger picture of Cargil, right? So that's one business, but where we see IBP going in the future? So I talked about our Meet Central America business just a little bit at the beginning of the presentation. We're actually going live with demand planning for them as we speak. and then we will do supply planning with them later. That particular project is interesting because we're actually using IBP for planning. We're not going to put in an APO system. So different than salt. So like I said, the diversity of Cargil will have many different looks and feels for integrated business planning, but that's really the beauty of it, is that we can do that. It doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all. So we can adjust it to the needs of the business. You know, this project was exciting for me and really engaging because I think we had great partnership and support. So not only with Bristlecone, we had a lot of learning we did side by side, which was fantastic, but also the SAP engagement and support has been good. And I think earlier there was a comment like, well, yeah, you could have requirements for how the system should be developed, and you can get on a list of 100 requirements and hope that someday it gets fulfilled. In our short time, we've actually had requirements that we have seen already come in the tool, which is the beauty of being in the cloud solution. So I'm a huge fan of that, and so we've seen some of our requirements already turned around the system, which is fantastic, and that's really getting our business users happy.